My wife cheated on me with her boss, claimed it was just emotional, but then I found out she stole over $200, $0 from our joint account to fund his new house, and now she's suing me for half of it because she says she deserves her fair share. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation where my wife, Lisa, would turn out to be so completely different from the person I married. We'd been together for 8 years, married for 5. Things seemed fine on the surface, but I started noticing little cracks. She was more distant, secretive about her phone, and her mood swings got worse. Still, I told myself she was just stressed from work or dealing with family issues. I never suspected she'd actually cheat on me, let alone steal over $200, $0 from our joint account to fund some new house for her boss, Robert. The first real warning sign was when I noticed some odd transactions on our bank statement. I wasn't great with numbers, but I caught a $50, $0 withdrawal that I didn't recognize. I asked Lisa about it, and she brushed it off, saying it was a business investment she was handling for her boss. She claimed Robert was planning to buy a bigger house, and she was just helping him with some personal finance stuff. I bought it at first because she's always been good with money, or so I thought. But then I noticed she was acting weird, more defensive, avoiding my questions, deleting texts on her phone whenever I came near. One night I came home early from work because I wasn't feeling well. I decided to check her phone just out of instinct. I'd never done that before, but something felt off. Her notifications were blown up with messages from Robert, and I saw a lot of flirtatious stuff, even references to secret meetings and getting away together. I saw texts where she called him babe, and he responded with things like "can't wait to see you tonight." My stomach dropped. I was stunned. My wife, who always claimed she loved me, was cheating on me with her boss, and not just cheating, she was also stealing from me to fund his lifestyle. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. My mind raced. How long had this been going on? How could she lie so convincingly? I started putting the pieces together, her recent trips for business, her late nights, the way she'd get defensive when I asked about her whereabouts. I confronted her that night just as she was getting into bed. I showed her the messages I found, and her reaction was a mix of shock, denial, and outright lies. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "It's not what you think. Robert and I are just friends. It's emotional, not sex. You're overreacting. It's just a fling, a mistake, but it's nothing serious." She told me I was paranoid, that I was insecure and jealous. She claimed I was imagining things, that she loved me and would never do anything to hurt me. But I knew better. I saw the way she looked at her phone, the way she avoided my gaze. I knew she'd been lying all along. The betrayal cut deep, but what made it worse was realizing she'd been stealing from us, our savings, our future, everything we'd worked for. I was furious, hurt, and honestly numb. I couldn't believe she'd do this to me, to us. All those years of trust gone in an instant. I felt betrayed on every level, emotionally, financially, morally. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there staring at the ceiling, trying to process what I'd uncovered. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time with a plan. I needed to understand just how far she'd gone, how much she'd taken, and what her real motives were. This was no longer just an affair. It was theft, manipulation, a complete breakdown of our marriage. The next morning, I started digging into our bank records more carefully. I pulled up every transaction, every transfer, every withdrawal. And that's when I saw the full scope of her betrayal. Over $200, $0 had vanished from our joint account over the past year. The money was funneled into accounts that she'd set up under fake names, supposedly to fund Robert. New house. I found receipts for furniture, renovations, and even a down payment on a house that matched the address Robert had been texting her about. It was like a punch in the stomach. She'd not only cheated on me, but had also stolen our life savings to finance her affair. And the worst part, she had the audacity to claim she deserved her fair share when she filed a lawsuit against me, saying I was withholding my half of the money. I couldn't believe her nerve. She was sitting there trying to play the victim, while she'd been lying, cheating, and stealing behind my back. My mind was a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could she do this? How could she be so selfish, so manipulative? I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what. All I knew was that I'd never feel safe again, not with her, not after everything she'd done. I was left with a choice: fight for what's right, or just let her walk away with everything she'd stolen. I didn't want to lose everything, but I also didn't want to be a victim anymore. That's when I started planning my next move. After I pieced everything together, the massive theft, the secret messages, her cold denial, the anger inside me started to boil over. I couldn't just sit there and pretend everything was okay anymore. I felt betrayed on a level I never thought possible. Lisa had played me for a fool for months, maybe longer, and now I was staring at the ruins of what I thought was our life together. I needed a plan, and fast. The first thing I did was get a lawyer. I knew I couldn't just confront her again without knowing my legal options. I sat in that office, pouring out everything I'd uncovered: the messages, the bank statements, the receipts. The lawyer listened carefully, then told me that I had a strong case for both divorce and financial restitution. The theft was clear, and her attempts to claim her fair share of the stolen money were outright fraudulent. She was trying to manipulate the situation because she knew she was caught. But even knowing that, I felt hollow. I'd trusted her for so long, and now I was left with nothing but a sense of betrayal and a burning desire for justice. I decided I needed to get my own proof of her lies, more than just the digital trail. I hired a private investigator to follow her around for a couple of days. I needed to see if she was still sneaking around or meeting Robert. The Pie came back with some shocking footage. Lisa was still meeting Robert in secret even after I confronted her. They'd been sneaking off to a hotel, sometimes late at night, sometimes during the day. I watched the footage in disbelief. Her words about just emotional affairs, her protests that she loved me, everything was a lie. She was still lying, still cheating, still stealing. The Pie also uncovered some new bank transactions. She transferred more money into accounts I didn't even know existed, accounts that were under her name but had no legitimate reason to be there. It was clear she'd been planning this for months. The anger I felt was mounting. How could she be so reckless, so selfish? She'd lied to my face, stolen from us, and now she was trying to squeeze me out of what was left. It was like she wanted to erase me, to walk away with everything while I was left holding the bag. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act, pretending to be the victim, crying about how unfair everything was. She claimed I was controlling, that I didn't trust her. She had the nerve to say I was the one ruining everything, even as I was uncovering proof of her betrayal. I couldn't believe her audacity. She'd lied so much that her stories didn't even make sense anymore. I was furious, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I couldn't let her get away with this. I had to fight back, for my own dignity, for what little was left of our marriage, and for the money she'd stolen from us. I started collecting all the evidence I could: screenshots, bank statements, the footage from the Pie. I knew I'd need this in court. I also started making arrangements for divorce, knowing I'd have to sever all ties with her. But I wasn't just after a divorce. I wanted justice. I wanted her to pay for what she'd done, not just emotionally but financially too. The thought of her walking away with half of everything, claiming she deserved her share, made my blood boil. She had no right to the money she'd stolen, no right to the house we'd bought, no right to anything. I was determined to fight for every cent, every ounce of what was ours. In the meantime, Lisa's behavior grew more erratic. She became more bitchy, more confrontational. She'd lash out at me over the smallest things, accuse me of trying to control her, even though I was just trying to understand what the hell was going on. She'd call me paranoid, say I was crazy for suspecting her, but I knew better. I had the proof, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this. Every time she lied, I felt more justified in my decision to take action. One night she snapped at me during a fight, saying, "You're just jealous because Robert doesn't want you anymore. Face it, your marriage is over, and I'm better off without you." That was the moment I realized she was beyond saving. She didn't care about the truth or the damage she'd caused. She only cared about protecting herself, about keeping her new life intact. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly on edge, waiting for her to slip up again or to take more from us. I had to do something, something drastic. I was ready to fight her in court, to expose her lies and to take back what was mine. The next step was clear. I was going to file for divorce, seek full financial restitution, and make damn sure she paid for her betrayal. I didn't know how it would all turn out, but I knew I couldn't keep going on like this. I'd been betrayed by someone I loved, someone I thought I knew. Now it was time to take control and settle the score. I owed myself that much. The day I filed for divorce was one of the hardest days I've ever faced, but also one of the most necessary. Sitting there in the courthouse, paperwork in hand, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I finally had a plan, a way to get some justice, and dread because I knew what was coming next: her fight, her lies, her manipulations. Lisa was a master at twisting things around, making herself look like the victim, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it this time. The filing was straightforward enough. I listed everything: our assets, the amount she'd stolen, the evidence I had gathered. I knew I had a solid case, especially with the footage, bank statements, and the Pies reports. I also made sure to include her affair with Robert, though I knew that wouldn't be the main focus legally. Still, it was enough to show a pattern of deception and betrayal. I wanted her to know that I wasn't backing down, that I was serious about holding her accountable. Once I filed, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of empowerment. For years, I'd been the one giving, the one trusting, the one trying to hold everything together. Now I was taking control, but I also knew Lisa wouldn't go down without a fight. That woman had a way of turning everything around, lying her way out of trouble, and convincing others she was the victim. I was preparing myself for her next move. Meanwhile, she caught wind of the divorce filing pretty quickly. Her reaction was predictable. She went into full-blown bitch mode. She started calling me names, accusing me of trying to ruin her life, of being paranoid and controlling. She told mutual friends I was abusing her emotionally and claimed I was trying to keep her away from Robert, which was a total lie. She even tried to spin it, saying I was jealous of her happiness with Robert. That was laughable. She made it sound like she was the victim, when in reality she was the perpetrator. She also ramped up her attempts to manipulate the situation. She showed up at my office unannounced, crying, begging me to work things out. She claimed she was sorry, that she'd made a mistake, and that she loved me, but her tears didn't fool me anymore. I saw through her act. She was just trying to buy time, delay the inevitable, and keep her options open. She was desperate to hold on to whatever she could: her affair, her money, her lifestyle. That's when I discovered she'd been lying about some of her expenses. She claimed she'd only spent a few $1,000s on Robert's house renovation, but I found receipts for close to $80, $0 worth of furniture, renovations, and even a down payment on a property in Robert's name. She'd been lying about the amount, trying to minimize her theft, but I had the proof. That realization made me more determined than ever to see this through. She'd stolen our savings, lied about it, and now she was trying to pretend everything was fine. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt betrayed, angry, and exhausted. I had to keep reminding myself that this wasn't just about the money. It was about trust, respect, and the life we built together. I kept replaying all the moments she'd lied, all the times I'd been blind to her betrayal. It hurt more than I could put into words. But I also knew I had to stay strong for myself, for the truth, and for whatever future I could salvage. In the midst of all this chaos, Lisa's lawyer started making demands. She claimed I was withholding assets, that I was trying to cheat her out of her fair share. She argued that since she'd contributed to the house and the savings, she deserved half of everything, regardless of the theft. Her lawyer even tried to spin her as the victim, claiming she was forced to take money from the joint account because she was under extreme stress from the affair. I couldn't believe how far she was willing to go to manipulate the system. I responded with my own legal counsel, presenting all the evidence I had collected. I knew I had a strong case, especially with the proof of her theft and the affair. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything, especially not what she'd stolen. I was prepared for a long fight, but I was also determined to get justice. I refused to be the victim of her schemes anymore. The emotional continued. I felt moments of hope, thinking maybe I could rebuild my life, and moments of despair, wondering if I'd ever truly recover from the betrayal. I couldn't help but think about all the years we spent together, the trust I'd given her, and how she repaid me with lies and theft. It made me question everything, my judgment, my choices, my entire marriage. But deep down, I knew I had to keep fighting, not just for the money, but for my dignity and my future. Now I was just waiting for the next move, her counterattack, her attempt to spin her lies again. I knew she would come back swinging, trying to twist the story to her favor. But I had the evidence, I had the law on my side, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I was ready to see this through, no matter how ugly it got. The fight for what's right had just begun. The court dates started coming fast after I filed for divorce. Lisa was relentless in her attempts to spin her narrative. She hired her own lawyer, of course, and they began pushing back hard. Her biggest argument was that I was trying to control her, that I was abusing her emotionally because I was demanding the truth and the return of the stolen money. She painted herself as the victim, claiming I was jealous of Robert, that I was paranoid, and that I was trying to ruin her reputation. All the while, she was still sneaking around, still meeting Robert in secret, and still lying about her expenses. Her lawyer's strategy was to claim that the money she stole was a gift from Robert, that she deserved her fair share of the house, and that I was trying to punish her for having an affair. They even tried to argue that the affair was emotional, so it shouldn't impact the division of assets. I couldn't believe the audacity. The judge listened carefully, but I could see he was unimpressed with her attempts to manipulate the situation. My lawyer presented every piece of evidence, bank statements, receipts, the footage from the pie. It was overwhelming. Every lie Lisa told was exposed, every attempt to shift blame was dismantled. Meanwhile, Lisa's behavior became more erratic. She'd show up at my house unannounced, crying, begging me to give her another chance. She accused me of trying to ruin her life and claimed I was trying to keep her from Robert. She even went as far as to say I was mentally unstable, trying to make me look like the bad guy. I was furious. How could she lie so blatantly? How could she pretend she was the victim when she'd stolen our life savings, cheated on me, and lied to my face? In one of the hearings, her lawyer tried to argue that I was withholding assets and that I was trying to cheat her out of her rightful share. They claimed she deserved half of everything, including the house, the savings, and even the money she'd stolen from us. I shot back with the evidence of her theft, showing how she'd transferred hundreds of thousands into accounts under fake names, how she'd bought property in Robert's name, and how she'd lied about expenses. The judge looked skeptical of her claims, and I could tell he was leaning toward siding with me. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt exhausted, drained from the constant battles, court, Lisa's manipulations, her crying fits, her accusations. I kept reminding myself that I was fighting for my future, for the truth. I thought about all the years I'd invested in our marriage, all the trust I'd given her, and how she had thrown it all away for Robert and some misguided idea of happiness. It hurt so badly, but I knew I had to stay strong. I couldn't let her win, not just legally, but emotionally too. One of the most shocking moments came when Lisa's lawyer tried to argue that her stealing the money was a mistake, that she was under stress, and that she deserved a second chance. I couldn't believe my ears. She was trying to justify her theft as some sort of emotional breakdown. I had to sit there and listen as they tried to paint her as the victim again. But I had the evidence, and I was prepared to fight back hard. I told my lawyer to push for full restitution, and I demanded that she be held accountable for every penny she stole. The judge finally set a schedule for the next phase: discovery, depositions, and eventual trial. I knew this was just the beginning. Lisa was going to do everything she could to drag this out, to sway public opinion, to make me look like the bad guy. But I didn't care. I'd been betrayed enough. I was determined to see this through and get justice. I wasn't going to let her walk away with a single dollar of our stolen money, and I certainly wasn't going to let her keep pretending she was innocent. At this point, I'd lost a lot of sleep. Every night I'd lie awake, replaying everything, trying to figure out how I'd let it get this far. I kept asking myself what I could have done differently, but deep down, I knew the truth. She chose this path. She chose Robert over us, over our marriage, over our life together. And now, I was left to pick up the pieces. I'd never fully trust her again, not after all the lies and deception. But I also knew I had to move forward, rebuild, and make sure she paid for what she'd done. The fight was far from over, but I was ready. I had the evidence, I had the law, and I had my resolve. I wasn't backing down, not this time. The courtroom battles were intense, but I could see that the evidence was stacking up against Lisa. Every deposition, every piece of testimony only strengthened my case. Still, she fought dirty, lying, twisting facts, trying to turn the judge and everyone else against me. She'd spin stories about how I was controlling her, how I was emotionally abusive, and how she was just a victim of circumstance. It was exhausting to listen to, but I had my proof and I knew the truth. One day, her lawyer brought up the emotional affair angle again, claiming that her relationship with Robert was harmless, that it was just emotional support during a stressful time. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. The messages proved otherwise, but she was trying to downplay everything. I had to sit there and hear her deny everything, even as I had footage of her sneaking out late at night, meeting Robert in hotel rooms. I felt rage bubbling inside me, but I kept my composure. I knew that the truth was on my side, and I was determined to see this through. Lisa's legal team also tried to argue that she deserved half of everything because she'd contributed to the mortgage and some expenses. That was laughable considering the extent of her theft. I had proof of her transferring hundreds of thousands into secret accounts, of her buying property under fake names, and of her lying about her expenses. The judge looked skeptical of her claims and seemed to be leaning toward my side, but I knew better than to assume anything was final until the final ruling. The emotional toll was enormous. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and frustration. I'd trusted her, loved her, and tried to build a life together. Now I was faced with the reality that she'd betrayed everything: our marriage, our savings, our future. It was a gut punch every time I thought about it. I'd lose sleep at night, questioning everything I'd ever believed in, but I also knew I had to stay focused. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice, about making her accountable for her actions. The most infuriating part was her constant attempts to manipulate the narrative. She'd show up at my place, crying, begging me to give her a second chance, claiming she was sorry and that she loved me. But I saw through her tears. I saw the lies behind her eyes. She was only trying to buy time, to manipulate the situation so she could keep what she thought was hers: her affair, her stolen money, her lifestyle. I refused to be fooled anymore. I told my lawyer to prepare for the final trial, knowing this would be the ultimate showdown. Meanwhile, Lisa's accusations grew more desperate. She tried to paint herself as a victim of my controlling behavior, claiming I was emotionally abusive because I was demanding the truth and the return of our stolen assets. She even accused me of trying to ruin her reputation, which was rich considering she'd been the one lying and stealing all along. Her lawyer filed motions to dismiss parts of my claims, but the judged most of her attempts, citing the overwhelming evidence against her. As the trial date approached, I felt a strange sense of resolve. I knew the truth. I knew what she had done, and I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. I wasn't just doing this for myself. I was doing it to send a message that betrayal and theft have consequences. I wanted her to understand that her actions wouldn't go unpunished, that I wouldn't let her walk away with our money, our home, or our dignity. The day of the final hearing was nerve-wracking. I sat there, watching her testify, trying to look confident even though inside I was burning with anger. Her lawyer's closing argument was full of lies and manipulation, but I could see the judge was unimpressed. I presented the last of my evidence, every receipt, every bank statement, the footage, and made my final plea for justice. I could feel the tension in the room, the weight of what was at stake. When the judge finally delivered the verdict, I felt a massive wave of relief mixed with exhaustion. He ordered Lisa to pay restitution for the stolen money, awarded me full custody of the house, and granted the divorce. She was also ordered to pay my legal fees. Her face twisted in anger and frustration, but I didn't care. I'd won the fight, but the emotional scars would stay with me. Looking back now, I realize how much this ordeal changed me. I learned that trust is fragile and betrayal cuts deep. I also learned that in the face of deception, you have to fight for yourself, no matter how hard it gets. Lisa's actions cost us everything, our savings, our marriage, and her reputation, but I refuse to let her win completely. I've started rebuilding my life piece by piece, and I know I'll come out stronger on the other side. To anyone going through something similar, my advice is simple: don't give up. Gather your evidence, stand your ground, and never let someone's lies define your worth. Justice may take time, but it's worth fighting for. After everything was settled legally, I finally felt a weight lift off my shoulders, but the scars of betrayal lingered. Lisa was ordered to pay back every penny she stole, and I got the house, the stability I desperately needed. Still, I couldn't ignore how much she had changed, how she'd become bitter, vindictive, and resentful. She tried to keep some semblance of control even after the court ruling, but I knew her true nature now. It was a bitter lesson, but I learned a lot from it. The aftermath was a mix of relief and reflection. I moved out of the house we once shared into a place that felt more like a fresh start than a prison of betrayal. I kept the evidence I had gathered, not just as proof of her theft, but as a reminder of how close I'd come to losing everything. I knew I'd never fully trust again, not in the same way, but I also knew I deserved peace and honesty, something she could never give me after all she'd done. Healing took time. I threw myself into work, into rebuilding friendships I'd neglected, and into finding new hobbies that kept my mind busy. The pain of betrayal was a heavy burden, but over months it became a part of my history rather than my present. I learned to forgive myself for trusting her so blindly, and I accepted that some wounds just take longer to heal. I also learned not to let the past define me. Instead, I focused on creating a future that was free from her lies and manipulations. Looking back, I realize how much I grew through this ordeal. It taught me to be more cautious, more aware, and more determined to protect myself. I became more skeptical, yes, but also more resilient. The experience hardened me in some ways, but it also made me appreciate honesty and integrity more than ever. I learned the importance of standing up for myself, of demanding the truth, and of never allowing someone to manipulate or steal from me again. To anyone who might be going through betrayal or similar heartbreak, trust me, it's one of the hardest things you'll face, but you can get through it. Gather your evidence, stay strong, and don't let guilt or shame keep you silent. Justice isn't always quick, but it's worth fighting for. And most importantly, remember that your worth isn't defined by someone else's betrayal. You're stronger than you think, and if you stay true to yourself, you'll come out the other side better for it. Now, I'm focused on rebuilding my life piece by piece. I've learned to value honesty, respect, and loyalty above all else. I've also learned that sometimes the biggest betrayals come from those closest to us, and that's a lesson I won't forget. Moving forward, I choose to trust carefully, love wisely, and never let anyone steal my peace again. That's how I'm going to get through the rest of my life, by staying true to myself and making sure no one ever takes me for a fool again.